Baby, we need to have a talk about internet safety. I slowly crumpled down onto the floor next to him. His laptop was open and he was playing Minecraft on a public server. His eyes locked onto the action. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in the chat box. Son, can you stop your game for a minute? He exited the world and closed the laptop and looked up at me. Mom, is this going to be another cheesy, scary story? What? I faked hurt feelings for a second and then grinned at him. I thought you liked my cautionary tales. He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Like many generations of parents, I use scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety. Single moms like me should use all the parenting tools at their disposal. He scrunched his face a little. They were fine when I was 6, but now that I'm getting older, they don't scare me anymore. They seem kind of silly. If you're going to tell a story about the internet, can you make it really, really scary? I squinted at him, and he folded his arms. Mom, I'm 10, and I can handle it. I'll try. I began. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. His expression indicated that he wasn't impressed with the terror of the introduction. He sighed deeply and settled in for one of Mom's cheesy stories. But I continued. Colby went online and joined several children's websites. After a while, he started talking to other kids in-game and on the message boards. He made friends with another 10-year-old, a little boy named Helper 23. They liked the same video games and shows. They laughed at each other's jokes. They explored new games together. After several months of friendship, Colby gave Helper 23 6 diamonds in a game that they were playing. This was a very generous gift. Colby's birthday was coming up, and Helper 23 wanted to send him a cool present in real life. Colby figured it wouldn't hurt to give Helper 23 his home address, as long as he promised not to tell it to any strangers or grown-ups. Helper 23 swore he wouldn't tell anyone else, not even his own parents. I paused the story and asked my son, "Do you think that was a good idea?" "No," he said, shaking his head vigorously. In spite of himself, he was getting into the story. Well, neither did Colby. Colby felt guilty about giving out his home address, and his guilt began to grow and grow. By the time he put on his pajamas the next night, his guilt and fear were larger than anything else in his life. He resolved to admit the truth to his parents. The punishment would be steep, but it was worth it to have a clear conscience. He squirmed in his bed as he waited for his parents to tuck him in. My son knew the scary part was coming up. In spite of his tough talk, he leaned forward, wide-eyed. I spoke quietly, deliberately. He heard all the noises of the house. The washing machine bounced around in the laundry room. Branches scraped against the brick outside his room. His baby brother cooed in the nursery, and there were some other noises he couldn't quite pinpoint. Finally, his dad's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hey, Dad," he called out nervously. I've got something to tell you." His dad stuck his head in the doorway at a weird angle. In the darkness, his mouth didn't seem to move, and the eyes were all wrong. "Yes, son." The voice was way off, too. "Are you okay, Dad?" the boy asked. "Mm-hmm," sung the father in his strangely affected voice. Colby pulled his covers up defensively. Is Mom around?" "Here I am." Mom's head poked into the doorway below Dad's. Her voice was strange and unfamiliar. "Were you about to tell us that you gave our home address to Helper 23? You shouldn't have done that. We told you never to give out personal information on the internet." Colby's mom continued. "Helper 23 wasn't really a kid. She just pretended to be one. Do you know what she did? She came to our house, broke in, and murdered both of us, just so she could spend some time with you." A wild-looking young woman in a blood-soaked t-shirt emerged in the child's doorway holding the 2 severed heads Colby shrieked and gasped as the woman dropped the heads on the ground, unsheathed her knife, and moved into the room to work on the screaming child. My little boy screamed too. He twisted his hands defensively over his face, but we were just getting started with the story. After several hours, the boy was almost dead, and his screams had become whimpers. The killer, startled by the wailing of a baby in another room, removed her knife from Colby. This was a special treat. She had never murdered a baby before, and was excited about the prospect. Helper 23 left Colby to die, and followed the cries through the house, like a moth to the flame. In the nursery, she walked to the crib, picked the baby up, and held it in her arms. She moved towards the changing table to get a better look, but as she held the baby, the crying died down. The baby looked up and smiled. Helper 23 had never held a baby, but she gently bounced it in her arms like a pro. She wiped her bloody hands on the blanket so she could stroke the baby's cheek. "Hey there, sweet little boy." The ecstasy of the hunt and sadism changed into something warmer, softer, but no less fierce. She walked out of the nursery, took the baby home, named him Eric, and raised him as her very own. After I finished the story, my son was visibly shaken. Between ragged staccato breaths, he stammered, "But Mom, my name's Eric." "Of course it is, son." Eric ran up the stairs to his bedroom in a fury of sobs. "But, deep down, I think you really liked the story."